Here's my take. In the midst of the blizzard of last-minute tariff threats and trade deals, we're losing sight of the big story here. In other words, we were living in a free trade world where tariffs were so small as to be largely irrelevant. And yes, other countries impose non-tariff
President Donald
barriers
Trump
on
has just imposed the highest average tariffs America has seen in nearly a century. It's not a minor adjustment. It's a reversal of more than 80 years of U.S. policy in favor of free trade. And this time, Canada, America's closest neighbor, is at the center of the storm. Trump calls it a victory. But the deeper question is, who really pays the price and what kind of world will these tariffs create? From free trade to high tariffs. For decades, tariffs between advanced economies were so low they were almost irrelevant. U.S. tariffs on European goods averaged about 1.5%, and Europe's tariffs on American products were even lower. Japan's tariffs were around 3%. In short, the system worked close to free trade. Trump has changed that. With his new rules, the United States now has the highest average tariff rate of any major economy. For supporters, this looks like strength. But the shift is not just economic, it's strategic. America has moved from defending open markets to openly breaking them, and the consequences go far beyond this year's trade numbers. Canada becomes the target. Among all U.S. partners, Canada stands out. The two countries exchange more than $1.2 trillion in goods and services each year. But Trump has slapped tariffs of up to 35% on Canadian imports, from lumber and aluminum to food products. His stated reasons? Protecting American farmers and cracking down on fentanyl, though Canada is hardly the main source of that crisis. In reality, Canada is a politically convenient target. It is close, it is dependent on U.S. trade, and unlike China or the EU, it cannot hit back with the same force. For Trump, that makes it an easy example to show voters he is tough on trade. But the immediate effect is clear. American consumers will face higher prices for Canadian goods. Carney's countermove. Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded with calm, not confrontation. Instead of trading insults, he is pushing Canada to reduce its dependence on the U.S. That means new trade agreements with Europe and Asia, fresh deals on energy and minerals, and stronger domestic industries. Carney has also tied economics to national security. He is boosting defense spending and building more self-reliance, arguing that Canada cannot depend on the U.S. for protection or prosperity. In short, what Trump framed as punishment could become Canada's opportunity to grow stronger on its own. The American consumer pays? The winners of this fight are not American families. Tariffs work like a hidden tax, and they fall hardest on lower-income households. When Canadian goods cost more, it's shoppers at Walmart and Costco who pay the difference. Yes, Trump points to small victories, lower tariffs on U.S. exports abroad. But these were already minimal, and the benefits are thin. The costs, meanwhile, are visible at the checkout counter. That's why economists call tariffs a tax that hits the poor the hardest. Trump's political win could turn into real pain for the very voters he claims to defend. Business turns political. For U.S. companies, the new reality is not about innovation. It's about politics. Instead of competing in open markets, they now spend time lobbying Washington for special treatment or looking for ways around the rules. Some reroute goods through low-tariff countries, undervalue imports, or inflate service charges that aren't taxed. This is exactly the type of distortion America once fought against globally. Now its own firms are forced to play that game. The result? Less focus on new products, more focus on political connections, and that makes the U.S. economy weaker over time. A more divided world. Beyond America's borders, the implications are even larger. For 80 years, free trade tied democracies together, creating economic bonds that discouraged conflict. The U.S. designed that system, and it thrived within it. Now, Washington is tearing it down. The risk is a world breaking into separate blocs. The U.S. on one side, while Canada, Europe, and parts of Asia deepen ties on another. America might still win some individual battles, but in the bigger picture, it could lose its role as the central power in the global economy. Trump's short-term victory over Canada may accelerate this shift. Carney is already moving to build new partnerships, showing allies that they don't have to rely on Washington's goodwill. Closing, Donald Trump declares that his tariffs prove America is winning. But look closely. U.S. consumers face higher prices, businesses chase political favors instead of growth, and allies like Canada are building paths that bypass the United States. Mark Carney's steady response highlights the contrast. Where Trump imposes tariffs, Carney lays foundations. In the end, Trump may win the political headlines. But the United States risks losing something far greater, the leadership of the global economy it once built.
Partners.
What's the general impression of Trump in Canada?
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada because he's a tax enemy. Well, first of all, it's not you say we have Americans and we have the U.S. As I've said on this show many times, that a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people. And this is just going to grow even more. It's going to keep being here for related costs to the auto sector, and that's going to increase. So the auto workers are going to be.
President Donald Trump has just escalated his trade war, raising tariffs on Canadian goods to the highest levels since the Great Depression. The new duties, 35% on Canadian imports outside of the USMCA trade deal, plus a 40% penalty on goods routed through third countries, mark a sharp escalation against America's closest ally. Trump insists this move will protect U.S. jobs and punish Canada for unfair practices. But the reality is more complicated. These tariffs may hurt American consumers and industries just as much as Canada. Today, we'll examine what Trump is trying to achieve, how Prime Minister Mark Carney is responding, and what this could mean for both economies. Trump's new tariff move. At the end of July, Trump announced the latest round of tariffs. Canadian goods not covered by USMCA now face 35% duties, up from 25%. And any attempt to ship products through a third country to avoid tariffs now triggers a 40% surcharge. The sectors hit hardest include automobiles, steel, aluminum, and everyday products like cans, construction materials, and electronics. Trump's justification was blunt. Canada hasn't done enough to stop fentanyl smuggling. It maintains barriers on U.S. farm products, and it isn't playing fair. But beneath those claims lies a bigger political calculation. Tariffs have become Trump's favorite tool to project toughness, even if the economic results are uncertain. Tariffs as a political weapon. For Trump, tariffs aren't just about trade, they're about image. He portrays them as a shield for American workers and a way to rebuild an American fortress. But the numbers don't support the promise. A Yale study estimates U.S. households will pay an extra $2,400 per year in higher prices. Since April, 37,000 factory workers have lost jobs, pushing industrial employment to a 5-year low. In autos alone, the tariffs are expected to cost $6.2 billion, threatening even more layoffs. Instead of bringing jobs back, companies are cutting shifts, adjusting supply chains, and raising prices. Consumers now pay more for clothes, electronics, shoes, wine, and even toys. In practice, Trump's tariffs look less like a rescue plan and more like a hidden tax on American families. Canada and Carney, firm but flexible. Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded with a mix of toughness and pragmatism. On August 21st, he held a direct call with Trump described as deep and constructive. The next day, Canada lifted some retaliatory tariffs to signal goodwill, but crucially kept duties on steel, aluminum, and autos, industries vital to Canada's economy. This approach is deliberate. Canada is keeping the door open to talks while making clear it will defend its core sectors. And in the meantime, it is working to reduce dependence on the U.S. Exports to the EU are up 25%, to the UK up 30%. And Ontario alone drew $40 billion in new investment last year. Carney's strategy is to avoid a head-on clash while quietly building Canada's resilience. The economic fallout. The impact of tariffs is already being felt on both sides of the border. For the U.S., consumers face higher prices on imported goods. Automakers and construction firms pay more for raw materials. Inflationary pressure risks reversing progress made in cooling household costs. For Canada, some exporters lose market share in the U.S., but the government is bringing production home and pivoting toward Europe and Asia. Over time, this may actually strengthen Canada's economic independence. The irony is that while both countries suffer, American households feel the pain most directly. Canada can diversify. U.S. consumers cannot escape higher prices at the checkout counter. The politics behind the policy. Trump's tariffs are as much about politics as economics. They appeal to his base by projecting toughness, even against close allies. In battleground states where manufacturing jobs have disappeared, the symbolism can outweigh the statistics. Carney, on the other hand, is playing a longer game. By easing some tariffs, he avoids escalating tensions. By holding firm on key sectors, he reassures Canadian workers that their industries won't be sacrificed. Both leaders are addressing domestic audiences. But on the global stage, Trump risks being seen as undermining alliances that have supported North American prosperity for decades. What comes next? The real test will be the review of USMCA next year. Trump may be using tariffs as leverage ahead of that process, hoping to extract more concessions. Canada, meanwhile, is signaling it won't be bullied. Its diversification strategy suggests it's preparing for a long standoff if needed. The choice now is whether Trump doubles down, pushing tariffs even higher, or whether the talks with Carney create space for compromise. Either way, tariffs are no longer about economics alone. They are bargaining chips in a broader contest over sovereignty and power. Conclusion. Trump's latest move against Canada is bold but risky. He argues tariffs will defend American jobs, but evidence shows they're driving up prices, costing jobs, and straining an alliance with America's closest partner. Carney's Canada is responding calmly but firmly, removing some tariffs to keep dialogue alive while protecting key industries and diversifying its economy. The outcome is uncertain, but one question is clear. Not how long Canada can endure Trump's tariffs, but how long Americans are willing to pay the price for them.